So one of the big topics of conversation out here, Francis Ngannou is going to take on the winner of Bader Ferreira. Okay, now, Francis deserves a lot of respect for that, and he deserves a lot of credit. First off, if you start with Ryan Bader is the most underappreciated fighter in MMA. I mean, it's to the point that I want to call him the most disrespected, but I can't do that because nobody says a bad word about him. Nobody thinks that's an easy night. So I can't call him disrespected, but he is underappreciated. He is undervalued. And some of his hard works, not to mention multiple organizations at multiple weight classes, just doesn't happen much. Okay. When you understand how dangerous Bader is, and I know that you guys do, right? Bader versus Ngannou is just that classic matchup that goes all the way back. The first time they set that octagon up in Mobile, Alabama in 1993, which is your striker versus your grappler. But when you have somebody like Francis that is putting so much time and effort specifically into stand-up, that strong grappler becomes exemplified in terms of how dangerous he is, in terms of what a terrible matchup you would want to have. When you're really focused a good year, a good 2 years, just in stand-up, to go back to mixed martial arts, oh, by the way, to take on somebody that strong and grappling, I've got to give Francis credit for not caring. And then Ferreira, I think that you guys are very unfamiliar with. Ferreira is awesome. And he's not awesome because he's a master wrestler or a master jiu-jitsu player or a master kickboxer. It's when you combine all of them, not to mention he's very raw. Tai Tuivasa, I find when I'm paying compliments to Tai Tuivasa, I often compliment him the same way, which is to say he's not very good compared to what I predict he's going to be, that he's a real diamond in the rough. And I use that example because that's exactly what I would have to tell you guys about Ferreira. I don't think you're overly familiar with Ferreira, but let me personalize this. The first time I met Francis Ngannou, I'm standing there staring at him, I'm going, this is a very large man. Like, that's crossing my mind. I'm going, my God, this is just a beautiful, big, strong, tall, lean athlete, which you don't see a ton of in the heavyweight class. When I met Ferreira, it was the same thing. I shook his hand as we're being introduced, and I'm looking at him going, you're a big, long, lean, powerful heavyweight. You just don't see a lot of them, right? And there's good reason for that. Think of the opportunity that you would have if you're a really big guy that's good at athletics. Football. I don't know how big hockey guys are, but what's the other? Basketball. You're probably just not going to go into this type of genre. So when we have these monsterful athletes in the sport, it's very interesting because as I'm telling you that Ferreira is not a master at jiu-jitsu, and then he's not a master wrestler, and he wasn't a master kickboxer, as I'm telling you that, those are the same ways I would have to describe Francis, right? But both those guys have had gold belts that says they can beat any black belt. So think of this purely from Francis's perspective. Francis has a job to do the same as every other fighter, which is to get the biggest paycheck against the easiest opponent. It appears that he just did the opposite. Him saying that he will take on the winner, because who is the most dangerous guy? Well, it's Ferreira or it's Bader. I don't know yet. Those guys are going to have to go and fight. Well, whoever comes out of that is who Francis wants to take on, who Francis is willing to take on. Not to mention they're very different opponents. I just think that there's an appreciation there and a little bit more to the story that perhaps isn't being told, right? If you go back, you want to break Bader down, you could go watch the last 5 years of him fighting. You're going to see a really good guy who's going to be very problematic that's largely the same guy. If you go and watch the last 5 fights of Ferreira, it is so colossally different from match to match. And that's where the Tai Tuivasa tie-in comes, right? When you have somebody that's a white belt, but the next time you see him, he's a purple belt, but the next time you see him, he's a brown belt. Like, he's making these huge gains. Not a lot of guys do that when they make it to this level. They're almost a finished product. They try to stay healthy. They get themselves in shape. Maybe they pick up a new skill every year. When you have guys like Ferreira that are just scratching the surface but have already made it to the top because of physical attributes, because of youth, because of some of it is naiveness, some of it's in between Some of it's not fully knowing what you're doing, but you're a great competitor, and you go out there and you stay in the fire longer than your opponent, and then you start to add skills over time. Again, those are the same way that I would have to describe Francis's career. Look where it got him. Interesting. It's very interesting that the Predator has already agreed. Take the hardest fight he can find. The winner, whoever comes out of Bader Ferreira, according to Francis, is next for Francis